So I got to ask you a question, and I want your input. This is the point where I want you to think about what I'm going to say, and I want you to either hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff on Facebook or X, formerly known as Twitter, or Instagram. But I'd actually like to hear some callers on this, and I'd like you to vet out why you feel how you feel about this. The number here is 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Chris Kroc is off this week. I'm filling in for him. He's taking a good week off. One of the beautiful things about this business, superstars like Chris, and he's a big old star here on the radio station. They get a lot of time to enjoy family time and some time off, and well-deserved. You just got to unplug when you do talk radio, and Chris is doing that this week. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and I get a chance to sit in here and fill in for Chris when he's out, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. I saw a story a week ago across multiple papers. Again, my story is I like to read a lot of publications. I watch all different television networks. I listen to multiple radio stations and pick up on news items and things that are going on in today across our here in North Texas, as well as surrounding states and across the country. And I formulate an opinion on those. Well, I saw a story across multiple publications that said a recent survey, and I find this interesting. The survey was done by the Ford Motor Company. And I'll come back to that in 2 minutes and tell you why that's important. The Ford Motor Company did some research and found that a certain percentage of employed people globally, not just here in the United States, but globally, and especially here in the United States, would be willing to take a pay cut for a better work-life balance. So my question is to you, how do you feel about if your employer, if you're working today or if you worked before, your employer were to offer you a pay cut, not eliminating raises, not eliminating bonuses, but what if they came to you and said, we're going to cut your pay by X% to offer you more work-life balance? Would you be okay with that? And what would percentages look like? Would you be willing to take a 10% cut in pay to achieve work-life balance? Would you be willing to take a 25% or a 35% or a 50% cut in pay? Would you as an employee be willing to take a pay cut? And if so, what percentage would you take to achieve work-life balance? And the other question I get asked is this: what does work-life balance look like? I think that's so hard to define. What does work-life... So I ask you yourself, what does work-life balance mean to you? I want to hear from you. I want to know how you define work-life balance. How do you describe work-life balance? Do you have it? And if you do, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to know how do you get work-life balance and what does that look like? My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And the phone number is 800-288-9227. That's 800-288-9227. That spells WBAP. Work-life balance. Would you be willing to take a pay cut? How much of a pay cut might you take to achieve work-life balance? And what does that look like? I hear people all the time talk about work-life balance. Got to have work-life balance. I'll tell you my perception on that in about 3 minutes. Give me 3 minutes, I'll tell you more about what work-life balance in my book looks like and how I define it and consider it. But I want to hear from you at 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. My buddy Garrett is ready to answer the phones, take your calls, and we'll get you on the air. Also in the newsroom tonight, we've got Lori Waffenschmidt following multiple stories, including the story from Mesquite yesterday, as well as Nikki Haley today, and she's also got updates throughout the hour on the 11-year-old girl down in Polk County that was just discovered a few hours ago to have passed. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. I want to hear your stories at 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. The rest of the story is this. I'm impressed with the fact that Ford Motor Company does that. I feel good about thinking about a major institution in this nation who actually spends time, money, energy, and effort to study things like this. And they do it so they can figure out how best to make big picture strategic decisions on their business. Kudos to Ford for doing that. As the story goes, this is a recent survey by Ford Motor Company. They found that 52% of employed people globally, 52, more than half the people around the world, would be willing to take a 20% pay cut for better work-life balance. 20%. So people, and it was pretty consistent with people here in the United States. People said, I'm willing to take a 20% pay cut to achieve better work-life balance. That's what the story says. I'm impressed with it being Ford. Jen Brace, the chief futurist at Ford Motor Company, who coordinated the 2024 trend report and its findings, said, I got to be honest with you. We're shocked as all. This really shocked us. We were really surprised that's the results we found. She said younger generations in the United States in particular were more willing to give up money for a better quality of life. Now, that part doesn't surprise me because as I look at the younger workforce today, as I look at my kids in their early 20s, they don't work like you and I work. They're not interested in that. They don't want work to get in the way of life. I see it in the workplace. I still work full time and have a day job, and I see it all the time. 20-something-year-olds that say, 5 o'clock, I'm out of here. You're on your own. Sorry, can't help you. Hell, I saw a story a couple weeks ago about a 20-something-year-old that said, I can't make it to an 8 o'clock meeting. I have a class, a workout class. And she was absolutely vilified across social media for saying that by baby boomers. So there's a work-life balance discrepancy between my generation, 60 years old, and my kids' generation, 20 years old. And the 20-year-olds, they are offended if you start talking to them about they're lazy and they don't have the work ethic that you and I do. They're offended by that because they don't define their work ethic the way you and I define work ethic. It's just a different generational divide. So I got to ask you the question, would you be willing to take a pay cut to achieve work-life balance? And if so, what percentage of a pay cut would you be willing to take? Would it take you 10% of a pay cut to get work-life balance? Would it take you 15%? Would it take you 20%? How much of a pay cut would it take for you to have in the workplace to be happy enough to say, I'll take that pay cut in exchange for work-life balance? 800-288-9227. That's 800-288-WBAP. That's the phone number. I want to hear from you. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. You can also hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff on Facebook, on X, on Instagram, or just dial 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. I'm impressed with the fact that Ford Motor Company is the source of this study. I like the fact that it's a big American company that actually takes the time to care about what I think and how I feel and how you think and how you feel. I find it interesting, the story. My name is Jeff, by the way, Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock. Chris is off this week on vacation. I get very fortunate enough to have the microphone, sit here in the studio, work with my buddy Garrett Harris here, and Lori in the newsroom will have updates on what's going on in the news coming up in about 12 minutes with some update stories. I know Lori's been following the story down in Polk County with the 11-year-old girl that never made it home. They found her dead today. Talking about a story that that a recent survey by the Ford Motor Company found that 52% of employed people globally would be willing to take a 20% pay cut for better work-life balance. And my question to you is, would you be willing to take a pay cut for better work-life balance? And how much of a pay cut would you take to achieve work-life balance? And then what does work-life balance look like for you? Because that's what's key to me is, what does it look like? How do you define it? How do you evaluate it? How do you look at it and say, that's it? Is it not answering emails at night? Is it not having two phones, a work phone and a personal phone? Is it turning everything off, going home for the weekend or whatever it is, and not coming back until the next whatever morning? Is it never doing social events? What does work-life balance look like to you? My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Kroc. If you'd like to weigh in, you can hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff, or just pick up a phone like Josh has from Sunnyvale. Josh, thanks for listening. You're on News Talk 820 WBAP and now FM 93.3.
Yeah, I would gladly take a pay cut for a better work-life balance, hands down.
Josh, how much of a pay cut would it take for you to have? How much? What's your number to say, if you give me X pay cut?
Yeah,
I'll take work-life balance. I'm willing to give up X income.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everybody. I mean, in my situation, my wife's income has grown exponentially in the last few years. But COVID kind of upended my life, and I'm now driving an 18-wheeler locally in the Metroplex, and I'm cranking out, 60, 65 hours a week. And I spend half a Saturday just, recovering from the week. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind, taking, a 10 grand pay cut, honestly, to be able to have, a little. I would love to have an 8-hour day or a 9-hour day, as opposed to these 12 and 13-hour days.
So you'd give up 10%, or not 10%, but $10,000 annual income to achieve work-life balance. You'd be willing to do that?
Yeah, but simply because I could afford it. I mean, I stepped into this because I didn't want to lose my home, and at the time, my wife was not making the money she's making now, and we all get kind of pushed into situations sometimes where it's what are you going to do to keep the mortgage? So,
Josh, how old are you? Because the interesting thing about the story is it varies by age group.
Sure. I'll be 44 this summer, so 43, yeah.
Okay, so based off of the research I've done, it's interesting that Gen Z, born between, when were you born? What year were you born? Were you born between 81 and 90?
1980.
Yeah, I was going to say I was thinking 1980, close to 80, 81. So you're what they call a Gen X. You were born between 65 and 80.
Right on the edge of it, yep.
You're right on the cusp. What's interesting is the Gen Xers, which you qualify as a Gen Xer, it's 43% of the employed people said that they would be willing to take a 20% pay cut. But what's interesting is the next generation below you, which is born between 81 and 96, the millennials, it jumps from 43% to 60%. Significant. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the different values that are changing throughout. I grew up. My parents were hard workers. That was just what it was. Blue collar, sun up to sundown. I just remember that my parents worked, and that's what they had to do to be able to provide for us and keep us kind of floating in that middle class range when I was growing up. So. I'm not afraid of work. I don't mind work, but it's just when it's all consuming and you don't have time for the other things you enjoy in life, So,
does your lifestyle, living with your parents and growing up and seeing them what they went through, does that influence your decision about I'd be willing to give up 10 grand to have work-life balance?
I don't know if that. I mean. I guess I'm looking more in the terms of I've got what I need, and I've got, I was never brought up to just focus on money. My parents did what they needed to do to provide, and so I'm sitting thinking, okay, I'm providing. We have excess income. That's where I'm at, So I'm sitting here going, I could trim some of that and still have excess income in my household. We don't have any debt aside from our mortgage. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. And I am actually, I literally, this actually crossed my mind last night on my way home from work. I was like, I am interested in possibly looking at doing something different that would be a step down from what I'm doing now if it would provide me a little bit shorter work week.
So let me ask you, Josh, thank you for calling. Josh from Sunnyvale joining us. We're talking about work-life balance from a story from Ford. Ford Motor Company found that 52% of employed people would be willing to take a 20% pay cut for a better work-life balance. And Josh is an example of it. Josh said, give me $10,000 less. I'm happy with that. If you give me work-life balance, let me ask you this, Josh. What does work-life balance look like? What do you need to have different in your life to have quote-unquote work-life balance? What does that look like? Define it.
Oh, so for me, it would be having time to engage in hobbies, to be able to do things that I want to do. Because right now, I go home and I take a shower and go to bed. I get up, make my lunch, and go to work. I don't have time. I have no time during the week, and I feel like that. And if I'm not picking up, when we had to have mandatory, overtime on weekends, So if I'm free, my weekend seems like it's just me doing nothing but, catching up with the things I couldn't do during the week, whether it be laundry, cleaning, whatever I have to take care of. So I'm not, I don't want to sound unappreciative or ungrateful at all, but like I said, I mean, my work week is, there's no time. I literally get up and I'm hustling to get ready to get out the door and get back to work and go spend a 12 to 13 hour day.
How many hours a week are you working, Josh?
It bounces between 60 and 65, but on a light week, maybe 55.
Aren't you, as a driver, limited in number of hours you could put in?
70 hours.
What's
70
that?
Hours. 70 hours is the limit. Yep.
Okay, I was thinking it was less than that.
I wish it was.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you for listening, and thank you for calling. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. I want to hear from listeners. Thank you, Josh, for being a part of the show.
Yep.
My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. I want to hear from listeners to see, what does work-life balance, define work-life balance. Define it for you. What does that look like? To Josh, it was, I want less than 65 hours a week. Give me back to 40 hours or so a week so he could take that time and use it for hobbies. What does work-life balance look like for you? 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. And how much of a pay cut would it take in your day job, your regular job, to be able to achieve that work-life balance? Would 5% pay cut do it for you? 10, 20? If your employer came and said, we'll give you a 25% pay cut and guarantee you work-life balance, would you take it? What do the numbers look like? I want to hear from you. 800-288-9227. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff filling in for Chris Crock. Chris is off this week. I get the chance to sit here in the studio, in his studio, and talk into his microphone, and you and I get a chance to have a conversation, and that's all it is. Great talk radio is just a great conversation. That's exactly what we're having. But you and I are on a first-name basis. Just call me Jeff. 800-288-9227 is a phone number. We're talking about a story I saw just this week out of Ford Motor Company. A recent survey by Ford Motor Company found that 52% of employed people globally, and that was consistent here in the U.S., would be willing to take a 20% pay cut for a better work-life balance. Over half of our country has said, I'll take a 20% pay cut, but give me work-life balance. That says a lot about what's going on in America. I applaud Ford for taking the time and initiative and spending the money to figure that out, because they use that data to figure out how to build better vehicles that meet our needs to the changing tune of our lives and lifestyle. And Ford takes that certainly very seriously. And Jen Brees, she's a chief futurist at Ford who coordinated this survey, said, I got to be honest with you, this really shocked us to find that out. Totally shocked us. I'll tell you more about what she had to say in about 4 minutes, but first I want to get to Andrew and talk work-life balance. Andrew, thanks for listening and thanks for calling. You're on Chris Crock Show with Westside Jeff, News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3.
Sure. Am I here?
You're here.
Hey, Jeff. I love the bumper music, and it's appropriate. That tune, the bumper music was Clocks. I think that's Coldplay.
Yep.
And work-life balance, that is near and dear to my heart right now. What I just want to kind of chime in and say is I'm going to take balance of my life over work life. The trucker, was it the trucker that just called in last?
Yeah.
Before?
Josh from Sunnyvale.
Okay, Josh, and he's talking about mandatory overtime. Now that really gets me, because it's been weird these last few years with COVID and all that. There's been a shortage in staffing and people forced to work at home. People got mortgages and stuff like that. What I'm finding, and I work in insurance, healthcare insurance, and for the last few years, mandatory has been just rampant. I mean, you do it or you die. You get fired.
Really?
And, well, it's really not that bad,
wow.
But it's mandatory because we've got our consumers or our customers who depend on getting their claims paid. And in the last couple of years, man, I tell you what, it's been really weird. But the enticement for the mandatory overtime is you make more money, right?
Sure.
And okay, so you make more money. But what does that do to your family and your friends, your personal life, work life versus personal life?
Your happiness.
It is happiness, and I'll tell you straight up, I would rather, I can't give you the dollar amount to it, I would rather have the personal time off rather than getting burnt out, which a lot of us are in these kind of jobs. But I kind of took the position where I looked at it where, I'll tell you what, Jeff, I look at it as I rent my time out to them, my employer. It's equal, but I rent my time out to them, so there's got to be some mutual respect. What I am finding now is with the cost of living going up, I mean, we all get it, but the cost of living and the price of everything, the mandatory overtime is overlapping and making up for some of the costed expenses. But it is at the expense of our personal time, our personal life, that balance. And
Andrew, let me ask you this. What does work-life balance look like to you? How do you define it? Define it for you.
I'm in maybe a different situation. My kids are all grown up. I'm not married. And so I have everything paid off for, so I don't have a mortgage. However, what it looks like to me is being able to make the monthly payment, the utilities, or whatever, unexpected expenses come up. So I would rather have that peace of mind and that tranquility and just being able to enjoy life now and be able to afford things without the stress of having a really, really solid, good balance. I think I've found it. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. But I'm concerned about other people who, some of my work cohorts who are having to depend on whether it's mandatory or voluntary overtime to lose part of their life to make payments. I think you kind of get it.
Yeah, I think what I hear you saying, Andrew, thank you for listening and thank you for calling. I think what I hear you saying is a couple things. Number one is work-life balance isn't 60 hours a week in overtime. And I think, Andrew, you resonate with what most Americans, and I'm just a common sense opinion guy, and I think common sense opinion is this. We all strive for work-life balance, but I had a company I worked for years ago. I had the leader of the company say, we will not adhere or work in the media space where we will promote pornography. And somebody said, how do you define it? And he had a great line. I can't define it for you, but I know it when I see it. And I think that applies to work-life balance. I can't define it for you, but I know when I see it. Now, for me, work-life balance, I hate the word balance. I don't have balance. I never have. Okay. I never will. I like to think about, instead of balance, I like using the word harmony. For me, there are times and periods in my life where I have harmony in my life, peace and harmony, and I've never achieved balance. So to me, it's not balance, work-life balance. It's about harmony, and moments of where my life is harmonious, and there are moments that it's not. So Andrew, thank you for listening. Go ahead.
My mantra in life lately, and I tell you, enjoy life now. This is not a rehearsal. Enjoy it.
Andrew, thanks for listening. I appreciate you calling. I love that line. Enjoy life now because it's not a rehearsal. You have a good night. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a part of the show. I got a tweet from Psycho Bob. Psycho Bob says, "Hey, Jeff, great show. Thanks for doing what you're doing. It's a great topic." Said, work-life balance is not sitting in your boss's office going over sales training until 9 p.m. I would agree with you, Psycho Bob. Shame on you if you've done that. He said, incidentally, and this was interesting, incidentally, Ford did some of the original productivity studies that defined the 8-hour workday, and they found that mistakes went up after that, which is interesting. So Psycho Bob says that when they went back to 8 hours and trying to create some work-life balance, that mistakes at Ford went up, which is interesting. So Bob, thanks for listening, and thanks for weighing in on that. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP, talking about a story about Ford put together a research study that showed that over half of America would take a 20% cut in pay to achieve work-life balance. Would you do that? Are you okay taking a pay cut? And how much of a pay cut would you be willing to take to achieve work-life balance? And then the other question I got to ask you is this: how do you define it? It's interesting because it's generational. What does work-life balance look like to you? I think I'll find that 60-year-old work-life balance is very different than it is for a 20-year-old or 40-year-old. I want to hear from you at 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Would you take work-life balance and a significant pay cut at your employer? And what does that look like? I see Carter online. We'll get to him right after this. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crocker, News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. So Ford, I find it interesting. Ford did this study, and the study shows that a recent survey by Ford Motor Company found 52%, over half of our country, employed people, and the same thing globally, said they would be willing to take a 20% pay cut for a better work-life balance. So my question to you is, would you be willing to take a 20% pay cut? Or would it need to be 10 or 15 or 25 or 50%? Or would you be happy with a 5% pay cut to achieve work-life balance? And then the other question is, define work-life balance. Because the story goes on to says that the percentage of people in the U.S. willing to take a 20% pay cut by age group, according to the survey, with Generation Z, which was born 1997 to 2012, 56% of them. So 56% of those folks born between 97 and 2012 were willing to take a 20% pay cut to achieve work-life balance. Millennials are born between 1981 and 1996, 60% of them willing to take a 20% pay cut in order to achieve work-life balance. Gen X, born between 1965 and 1980, 43% of them. And baby boomers, it's my generation, born between 1946 and 1964, 43%. So the story there is the generation that's least willing to take a pay cut to achieve work-life balance are Gen X folks born between 65 and 1980. The generation most willing to take a significant pay cut of 20% to achieve work-life balance, millennials, born between 81 and 96. I once was in front of a millennial having a conversation about something, and the cocky young guy said, "Okay, boomer." Looked at me and said, "Okay, boomer." That caught me a little off guard. I was like, nothing offends me. But when I heard that, and the look on his face, I was like, that was a little disrespectful, but yeah, whatever. It's life. Pay cuts. Would you be willing to take a pay cut? And if so, how much of a pay cut to achieve work-life balance? And what does work-life balance look like for you? My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock. You can pick up the phone and call me at 800-288-9227. Like Carter from Joshua. Carter, thanks for listening. You're on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on the FM at 93.3. Thanks for calling.
Hey, sir. How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for calling. Thanks for listening. What's your thought on pay cut for work-life balance?
I would not take a pay cut for a work-life balance.
Tell me more.
I am young. I'm 19, and I have no kids, no wife. I have not really. I mean, I like to live life, but I wouldn't have an incentive to work less to get paid less, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I may have a very rural view for people my age, as I hear that a lot of people like to, kind of want to party and do all this and live life while they're young, but I see it as a kind of, I should work as much as I possibly can while I'm young, so that when I'm older, I don't have to worry about it as much and I'm not, kind of caught up.
I appreciate hearing that out of you, Carter, being 19 years old and saying, I'm not willing to take a pay cut to achieve work-life balance, because I think the perception of older generations, including mine, is that 19-year-olds are lazy, and their attitude is they don't want to work. And I'm glad to hear that out of you, that that's not the story. Where do you work? What do you do? And if you don't mind sharing, and if you do, that's fine. Don't do, but where do you work? What do you do?
So I work for a contractor. I'm a pipe fitter, and I work all around Fort Worth. We had just got done with a job that was 7/10s for about a month and a half, and I mean, I had absolutely no problem doing it. I just
7/10s, as in 7 days a week, 10 hours a day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow, my dad was a plumber, pipe fitter, so I get it. I understand it. That can be very taxing on your body in particular. So you work 7/10s, and then how many days did you have off after that?
Probably a weekend, and then I was back to a 40-hour work week, and then, I work in the field, so we have overtime that's on and off, or, some weeks you'll get shorter than 40, but yeah, that's kind of how it goes. It varies a lot, but you want to get the most overtime that you can, in my opinion.
Carter, do you think that's consistent with your peers, similar age group? You say you're 19, and I'm talking the group 18 to call it 28. Do you think they feel the same way that you do, that they're not willing to take a pay cut to achieve work-life balance?
No, I don't, especially all of the kids that are 19 to 23, my age. They're all in college trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, and which is no problem with that. I was very fortunate to figure out what I wanted to do at a very early age. But no, there's no shot they have the same opinion as me from what I'm hearing. Interesting.
Carter, thank you for listening. I appreciate you being a fan of Talk Radio, and thank you for listening to the show tonight. It's great to have you along, and thank you for what you do. My dad was a plumber and pipe fitter, and so I'm the son of a plumber. That's why I didn't go into plumbing, because I went on too many jobs with my dad where he said, go out in the truck and give me a crescent wrench. And I'd go out and get it, and it'd be the wrong size, the wrong one. You know how many trips I made like that. You get it. You understand it. You've lived it. That's why I didn't fall into plumbing. You're laughing because you've experienced that, haven't you, Carter?
Yes, that was the reason that I did fall into the trade.
You learned the difference between a crescent wrench and a set of pliers and some snips and where they all were. I wasn't that bright, so congratulations. Again, Carter, thanks for listening. I appreciate you being a part of the show, and keep listening. I want to continue this conversation Top of the hour, we've got the news coming up. Lori Waffen-Schmidt just dropped a note on my desk in front of me. It said coming up in about 4 minutes, she's got the updated story about the Amber girl down in Polk County that they found, unfortunately, never made it onto the bus, and they found her dead. And then also a story about a supersonic jet. I haven't seen all the details, but I think there was a new record, maybe an American Airlines plane. This is big for American Airlines here in our community, and interesting story about maybe American Airlines and supersonic jet, something like that, coming up in about 4 minutes in the news. Lori, I see you're over there right now in the newsroom typing away, getting ready to do that story coming up in about 4 minutes. Lori Waffen-Schmidt in the newsroom. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. On the other side of this, we'll continue the conversation about taking a pay cut to achieve work-life balance. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff in for Chris Kroc on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3.